I was 20 years old, and we were at a camp as students together studying the Word of God. And we read the Great Commission. And that day, as I read that verse, it was not the first time I read it, but it jumped out of the Word, it jumped out of the Bible, and it gripped my heart. And that word go, I knew that I have to leave my comfort zone. Make disciples. At that time, I was already evangelizing, but I was making converts and leaving many spiritual babies behind. Make disciples of all nations. And I didn't have a vision of anything beyond my own country. And that day I knew, if I want to be a disciple of Jesus, this is a command to his disciples. If I want to call myself a disciple of Jesus, I have to obey this command. And immediately I was reminded of Mozambique. That was already in my heart. And I knew I was called to Mozambique. It took me 7 years to get there, since the day I felt I was called. And I'm glad. I wanted to stop my studies right there and just go. And I'm glad I didn't go, because I was not ready yet. God had to do a deep work in my life. And we lived in the northern part of Mozambique because we did research since that time that God called us and started to pray for the people of Mozambique. And we knew the unreached people groups of Mozambique are more in the north. And then after 8 years there in the city, we mostly learned what not to do in those first 8 years. We made many mistakes. We tried many things. But we started a growing frustration in our hearts started, because we as YWAM, we were one of the first missions there, and all the new missionaries that came in, they just came to the city. And there were already many churches in the city. And we were already there. But there were hundreds of villages, Yao villages, Muslims. We prayed about it, Paula and I, and we really felt convicted. God is calling us to go and live in a village, in a cousin village, where there's no church amongst these people, no evangelical witness. And we went. And when we shared with our team that day, with our YWAM team, we want to go, there were 3 others that said, God has been speaking to us too. We want to join. We want to go with. 3 days prayer and fasting at the lake, asking God, where do you want us to go? And all of us individually heard the same name, Itipela. And we went to live there. The first 2 years, we did not preach the gospel. We just lived amongst the people. We prayed a lot. The spiritual darkness was so much. This people is known for their witchcraft. They feared for their witchcraft. And the spiritual heaviness was so dark, even to have quiet time at that time was difficult. But we spent a lot of time in prayer. We learned the language and the culture because we wanted to bring the gospel as good news. We wanted to bring the gospel not for them to become South Africans, but we wanted to introduce them to Jesus in a way that they would understand. And we were looking for the persons of peace in the community. Who is open to the gospel? Who will be able to teach others? Who are people of influence here? And Geraldo, our colleague, found Mr. Maduka. He was an old man, but he was one of the chiefs. Actually, he was the advisor to the king. There were 5 kings amongst the Yao, and one of them lived in that village. And when the king passed away, he was the one that did the ceremony to anoint the new king, a real man of influence. But he loved the Bible stories. And Geraldo befriended him. Geraldo learned language from him. And then Geraldo told him Bible stories. And we gave him an audio Bible. But one day, Mr. Maduka fell ill. And he was so sick that he could not get out of bed. This young YWAM even went and spoon-fed this man in his bed. He took a basin of water in those days and every day bathed the old man in his bed. And God healed Mr. Maduka. And when he was healed, in the public meeting, He declared. Now, you have to understand, Mr. Maduka is a Yao. Geraldo, this young man, is a Makua. And these two tribes, they don't get along well. But Mr. Maduka said in front of his people, amongst all my children, he declared, I do not have one son like Geraldo. And because of this love of a young YWAMer, Mr. Maduka received Jesus as his Savior. And the first church there was about 5 people, and Zidane was the youngest. And when the persecution came, these people with the long beards and the robes came from Malawi. They heard they were Christians in our village. Now we encourage them, don't call yourself a Christian. This is going to be an obstacle. Say you are following Jesus or call it something else. But because they're associating with us, they were just called Wakrista, the Christians. So the rumor spread, there are Christians in this village. So these people with the long beards came and they visited each one at their home and they threatened their family and said, who do you think you are? To be a Yao is to be a Muslim. You will see what will happen. Now that expression in the Yao language, it's a threat of witchcraft. And they actually kill each other with witchcraft. So these people were scared and they came together with Pedro. That was exactly the time that we were on holiday in South Africa. And Pedro encouraged them, they asked for prayer. And when Pedro got them together, the group, this first group sat on the grass mat and had their church. You know, the youngest of them, Zidane, was the first one to stand up. And he said, even if they kill me, I will follow Jesus. And one by one, these men stood up to declare themselves willing to die for their faith. Now they were serious. Nothing happened. But now they made a commitment and they started to share the gospel with their families. We invested into those people around us. I never became the pastor of the church that we planted as the foreigner. We were more behind the scenes and we invested into the leaders. And what I taught Lino, he taught others. I invested into Pedro and Geraldo and the others around us. The multiplication only started after we left. And it happened this way. We left there with 20 believers. Within 9 months, there were 40. How did it happen? Very simple. The first believer died. Then people started to come to the Lord. Now we started to see multiplication. 40, within a year, 60. And it started to grow. 3 years after we left, they called me, please come and speak at the Yao conference. What is a Yao conference? By that time, there were 300 believers right around the province. Small pockets of believers everywhere, mostly the YWAMers and people that we train that start these small groups all over the province. They got 200 of them at the same place. As they stomped their feet, the dust just rose into the air. And as it rose into the air, the Spirit of God just came down like a blanket in that place. Tears just rolled down my eyes. And I just thought of all the sacrifice, people that have worked many years before and not see fruit. And here, 200 people worshiping God in the Yao language. So then, after that conference, something broke and we started to see movement. People would come and say, I have friends, I have family in the next village. I want to take the gospel to them.